Welcome back to the Rob Matus Show on LifeSet TV, and we are still broadcasting, as you can see, and we're trying to have a guest or two each week from a hot zone due to the Chinese Communist Party coronavirus pandemic. And today, it's local Louisiana businessman Bobby Ragsdale. He was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, graduated from Isidore Newman High School, went on to study American politics at West Point Military Academy and became the president of the class of 2007. He commissioned as a cavalry officer in the United States Army and served on active duty until about 2018. And his deployments include both to Iraq and Afghanistan. He's a Bronze Star Medal winner and former commander of the U.S. Army's only airborne armored cavalry unit. He transitioned to the reserves in 2018, and he's still in as an officer in the Civil Affairs branch, and that's a component of U.S. Army Special Operations. He currently commands the headquarters company of the 478th Civil Affairs Airborne in Miami, Florida, but lives here in Metairie, Louisiana. And he's also been selected and was selected while he was on active duty to pursue a master's in public administration from Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. So we share that alma mater. And now as a civilian, works as a real estate developer and public policy consultant. While serving as a community leader in various charitable and political endeavors, he's currently a candidate for Jefferson Parish Republican Parish Executive Committee, District 4. Bobby, we're going to get to an update on your experiences in the New Orleans area during the pandemic response, and then we're going to discuss a very tough subject from your businessman's perspective, price gouging. Bobby Ragsdale, welcome to the Rob Matus Show.
Sir, pleasure to be on. Good to see you as always.
Well, we appreciate your time. How are you and your family doing? What are your experiences in the New Orleans area? I know that in Louisiana, the hospitalizations are climbing and folks on respirator numbers are climbing. And I think New Orleans has about 70% of all the deaths due to the virus in the state of Louisiana. Are you guys doing all right?
We're doing very well. Thank you for asking. I've got 3 kids and my wife and I both work, but we're in the home right now with our own home offices. So we're tagging in and out, taking care of the kids, trying to get outside in the yard. The weather's been really great. Obviously, haven't been going anywhere. Every time we go to Sam's or something for a supply run, it feels like we're leaving the wire a little bit. Turns out we just found out the other day that my stepmother-in-law, Megan's stepmother, had been sick with a viral pneumonia a couple of weeks ago before everything really hit the fan down here. And there were no tests available at the time, but now she went to a follow-up just the other day with some CT scans, and they're pretty sure that she had COVID-19 based on the damage to her lungs and the symptoms that she was showing. So the upside is that she's now immune, and she seems to have come out the far side of it. And but she knew at the time that it wasn't good and was contagious, so she kept away from us and the kids. And so we've got through that already. Didn't even know at the time what it was, but coming through now, and like everybody else, we're just kind of bracing for what's going to happen here. I'm following the governor's updates. We're talking about running out of medical supplies or medical capacity in a couple of days, potentially based on the growth rate. So everyone's, there were some deniers at first and a lot of, partisan bickering, but for the betterment of all, I think most Louisiana residents, certainly in the New Orleans area, have figured it out, and they're all hunkering down, staying home. I don't know anybody personally who's flaunting that at this point. Everybody seems to be toeing the line.
Yeah, that's good news to hear. The one lingering thing that I'm concerned about, and I worked the pandemic in 2009 as a colonel for a unit that was spread all over the globe and had about 15,000 people in it. So I've got a little bit of experience in the global operations all the way down to the local for pandemic ops. And the only thing I'm concerned about right now is that we know we have these hot areas like New Orleans, New York City, and we haven't really restricted travel in and out, especially for workers on the ground, like law enforcement. I live on the north shore of the lake, and Lake Pontchartrain, for those that aren't familiar with Louisiana, and we're really a bedroom community for a lot of folks that are still working as essential folks over in New Orleans. Orleans. So that back and forth, I would really rather they be housed over there for the duration until we can get this thing bent. But it is what it is, and hopefully we'll start seeing some positive results on the data in the next couple of weeks. But it is going to be a tough couple of weeks. My
What I
analysis.
can say is that the Army Reserve response has been really strong from the very beginning, or at least going back 3 or 4 weeks now, that they've stopped all movement. So like you pointed out, I serve in Miami, Florida. I fly down once a month. Well, they've shut down all battle assemblies for the whole Army Reserve right now. Nobody's traveling, nobody's congregating. So, the Army's always been on the forefront of this sort of thing, and this is no exception. They're taking the lead and taking it very seriously. And so I've been monitoring my Army email daily. As a commander, I still get daily updates. I have soldiers and civilians who work for me down in Florida, and I'm coordinating with them regularly to make sure that we're responding appropriately.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think most folks are. There's a couple of activities that worry me. Like church services and those kind of things. Our pastor is doing our church is doing everything remotely because we have the technology to do that now. But you still see some folks gathering, and that's troubling. But they'll have to face the consequences, and I'm sure they know what those are if they come down with the disease, especially for the older folks in these communities. But just out of curiosity, did they, your mother-in-law, did they say that the lung damage was permanent?
I don't know. Probably. I think, if I recall correctly, yeah, I think the damage is permanent. I don't know the extent of it, and she seems to be getting around just fine. I mean, she wasn't running any marathons anyway, so I don't know what the impacts are. But the CT scans showed scarring, and I don't know the medical terminology, but evidence of significant issues that aren't caused by a lot of other things.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get to the point where testing is available to everybody, and even your family could get tested, because y'all could have had, been carrying it and not even known it, or even
right. And I think that's probably more concerning for people like me and my family. We're young and healthy. I'm not terribly concerned about the illness itself. I think all of us carry the fear and the potential guilt of having carried it around, and that's why we're trying to be as precautious as we are.
Yeah, my brothers and I, we have my mom ensconced in her home, and we're not letting her out. So we're not physically interacting with her either. She's not real happy about that, but she's 79 years old. We need to keep her healthy. Well, Bobby, I appreciate you coming on and give us an update. It's good to hear that folks are taking it serious. I think as far as hospital capabilities going, the governor and the mayor of New Orleans and the Jeff Parrish authorities have done a great job trying to build that capability as fast as they can to increase it and ramp it up, surge it up to meet the need. We'll probably be right on the edge, especially with ventilators, but it sounds like the federal government's fully got the message now, and at least it's on the way is what I'm hearing. So that's good news.
Sure. And it looks like industry is stepping up. There's a number of companies right now that are producing ventilators, designing new ventilators, working on masks. And I've been, like a lot of people, I feel a little impotent right now because I'm not a medical professional, but I'm the sort of person who goes out and serves and tries to find ways to solve problems. So for me, sitting here, like, what can I do? I've been trying to coordinate suppliers from around the country with the hospitals. Regularly, I get people from all over the country reaching out to me. Hey, Bobby, who do you know in the hospitals down there in New Orleans? Because we've got N95 masks, or we've got this, or we've got that. And I've been trying to put those people in touch with supply chain people at the hospitals, and moderate effectiveness. But I think, like a lot of people, we're just all trying to find ways to help and contribute to the community.
Absolutely. When we get to the end of the show, please, I'll ask you for contact info if you want to put it out there where you can be reached to help facilitate those kinds of things, because that's the reason why I still wanted to do my show, even though we're not at full production capability, is to get ideas like that and information out like that out and give folks opportunity to help, because a lot of us that are used to taking action are not able to really, my wife and I are both in our late 50s. So we're homeschooling my son, which we did achieve a great thing yesterday. I will point out and brag a little bit. My son achieved his first A honor roll report
Yeah.
card yesterday afternoon ever, and I'm very proud of that since I'm his teacher. And so we had a little celebration.
Congratulations. That's terrific.
So we are getting some things done.
That's good.
I appreciate
I'll brag for a second too. My oldest Leo is starting kindergarten next year, and we just got notice last night that he was accepted into the International School of Louisiana's French program, French immersion program. So we're
that's
real excited
fantastic.
about that.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. We're real excited about it.
But as a businessman, I wanted to get you on because we had discussed this personally, between the two of us, this subject. And it's as you said in your note to me, it's a very emotional subject. It is. Before we came on, I said, when I hear the term that it's happening, especially to people that are vulnerable, it does make me angry. And the term is price gouging. Why is it such an emotional issue for us? Because, I'm a free market guy. I'm fairly libertarian minded, especially when it comes to economics. So you would think a person like me wouldn't be bothered by prices changing and the market setting the availability of supply and responding to demand.
Well, the truth is that there's a culture in America and really probably all over the world in terms of the way we view pricing and fairness. And, when you study economics, you find that we as people didn't really evolve. Our brains aren't intuitive at grasping a number of economic concepts. And as a result, we've wrapped ourselves around a lot of ideas about fairness and justice that maybe don't make sense in bare economic scrutiny, because economics is not, it's a social science, but it's almost like a law of nature, the way that markets work and the way that economics can influence markets. And I used to be an anti-economics guy. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way that all the numbers and the math and the money that motivated me exactly. But as I started to study economics professionally and in formal academic settings, I began to learn more and more about how economics provides the tools to explain human behavior in a variety of situations. And for that matter, it's about not so much thinking about what sounds like it's fair and more about thinking about the results that you want to achieve. What is it that you want to do? And if you want to increase utility, if you want to get the goods to the right people, then markets are the way to do that. And so if we back up a little bit, price gouging, first off, is a emotionally laden term. And it really, we ought to be describing the economics of emergency pricing. That's a more objective way of looking at it. And if you have anti-price gouging laws effectively in place, what's called a price ceiling. And you see price ceilings a lot of the time in communist countries and socialist countries. The Soviet Union was a classic example. Everybody, everything cost the same amount. The government made everything. The government set production. But I talked to a former Soviet citizen one time, and he explained to me that when he first came to the free world, he was confused about why all Americans didn't walk around with just hundreds of dollars of cash all the time. I said, well, why would you need that? This is before credit cards, of course. He says, well, what if you walk by a store and televisions are on sale? I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, if you go in the Soviet Union, in 1980 or 85 or whatever, a color TV would be very affordable. Everybody could afford one. It's $100 or something because the price was set. But if you weren't there, the moment they unloaded them off the trucks, you didn't get them because they went like that. Now, if you wanted lucky few to get one, life is good because you got a cheap TV. But most people don't have one. And the takeaway here, and this is extremely well studied in economics, is when you place a price ceiling, what you get is a shortage because people buy up more than they need, or the producers won't produce enough to meet the demand. The inverse is true on price floors, tangentially. Sometimes you see price floors on as a form of like agricultural subsidy. You can't sell corn below this price. That helps to regulate the market in theory, but what you end up with that is surpluses. When you have a price floor, you end up with a surplus, and that tends to have, when you see pictures in Africa or even in America of farmers burning their crops because they can't sell them.
Yeah.
In both cases, allowing the market to find the market equilibrium for complex complex reasons that are well studied results in the greatest benefit for society. So
Mhm.
here, when we talk about price gouging, by restricting the way that markets can meet demand and where the markets can raise their prices to find that equilibrium point, what we do is we create a situation where it encourages hoarding, it disincentivizes new suppliers from entering the market, and you end up with shortages. And we see this right now with toilet paper, with hand sanitizer, with masks. I went to Home Depot, or I went to, excuse me, Sam's the other day, just to get groceries for my family, and a number of people were walking around with N95 respirators.
Yeah.
Now, we as a society have been dealing with that a couple of different ways. I've seen a lot of people shaming those who are walking around with N95s if they're not medical professionals, and I understand that perspective. But we created the conditions that allowed that to happen, because if the prices had gone up early, then people wouldn't have been able to afford them, or they would have had to make harder choices about it. That,
Yeah.
you know, oh, I can buy a dozen surgical masks for the price of one N95. I don't want the surgical masks. I want the N95. And the argument that people often make is it's taking advantage of people who are vulnerable.
Right.
And it's not that I don't hear that, and maybe there's truth in that. But you've also got to zoom out a little bit to the bigger picture, because if you have dynamic pricing, it encourages things like preparation. You know, here's a personal story. When I first moved back down south after being in the Army all over, I was stationed, my last tour of duty was at Camp Shelby, Mississippi. And there was a hurricane that came through. And I didn't have a generator because I've been living in places that don't really need generators. So I figured I'll just wait and see what the hurricane's going to do. And if it gets close, I'll run over to Sam's or Walmart or Home Depot or whatever and see if I can't scoop up a generator. But by
Mhm.
the time I get there, they're all gone. They're all sold out. And now the strategy that I've employed is one that makes sense given the constraints that I have, because I can buy a generator on the day of a hurricane for the same price as I can buy it for 6 months beforehand. But if I knew in advance that the price would go up 30 or 40% when we're in the cone of uncertainty for a hurricane, then that would incentivize me to prepare better to buy a generator earlier than I would have it. Then the supply chain would be more fluid and you wouldn't see these surges so much in pricing or in supply. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, when like in my family's case, we took the opposite view when we moved down here. We're like, well, we know that during Hurricane Katrina, generators got scarce, so we
Mhm.
installed a full house emergency generator when we bought the house. So we did an upfront
Mhm.
outlay of funding based on potential scarcity, based on experience. How does that interact with what your approach did in this whole issue?
Well, it's exactly what I'm talking about. So you based your decision off of a knowledge of scarcity, which is in effect a kind of cost. So really, it's not that the costs haven't gone up; they have gone up considerably. You have to work harder to find one. You have to plan earlier to get one. You have to wake up early in the morning. You have to track shipment schedules so you can be there first. You have to wait in line. Here's an example. My economics professor back at Harvard told me a story. He says, I drink a cup of Starbucks coffee every morning on the way into work. It costs $4. The moment that Starbucks decides to give those coffees away for free would be the day that it became too expensive for me to get one, because I would have to wait in line for an hour to get my coffee. And what that gets back to is the concept of rationing, which is in economic terms a way of distributing scarcity. We often talk about rationing in terms of artificial constraints on
Mhm.
allocation of resources. And in the strictest sense, that's true. But in a broader sense, we can think about the way that scarce goods are allocated. So certain goods are not scarce. Air, water, it's everywhere. It's incredibly valuable to us. We need air to live, but if it's easy to get, there's no scarcity for it. But almost all other goods, from the house that we live in to the electricity we consume to the clothes that we're wearing, there's a finite amount of it. There's less of it available than we could theoretically consume. So I have to make decisions about the things that I buy and the things that I want. Um, and so usually the way that we discriminate between the, make choices based on how much that I can allocate to myself is with cost. I only make, X dollars a week or a month. I can spend that money on rent, on electricity, on cable TV, on whatever those things. But I had to make those choices. And if I choose to spend it all on Louis Vuitton bags one week, then I'm not going to eat or something else. I've been forced to make a decision. Whereas I don't have to decide between Louis Vuitton bags and oxygen. I can have both of those. In the same way, if cost is taken out of the equation, which is what we're seeing right now, because we've got cost ceilings. So cost is now not the way that we're rationing. We're having to ration in terms of traditional rationing, coupon rationing style, which is the phrase coupon rationing comes from like old bread lines or the Soviet system where you get stamps and you bring stamps and exchange them for loaves of bread or whatever. But we can also ration in terms of only one person's allowed, or you can only have one paper towel per person. I was at Sam's yesterday, and the frozen aisle, the way that they're doing it is one frozen aisle item per person. One of each item. You can't have multiples of any one item. Well, that makes sense maybe for some people. But I have a family of 5 that I have to feed. Maybe it doesn't make sense for me when I'm trying to buy waffles for my kids, or whatever the circumstance might be. At the same time, there might be someone out there who doesn't really even need one of any one thing, but he sees these limitations and he gets scared, which is what I think happened with toilet paper. I think it only takes a couple of idiots to go and buy up all the toilet paper at Rouse's or whatever grocery store that you go to. Yeah. 5-10 people buying 10 rolls each, and your 10 packets each, and you're done. But then I think other people, becomes like a run on the bank. So other people see these people snatching them up, and they think, oh, number one, maybe they know something that I don't know. And number two, if they're snatching them all up now, I got to make sure I get mine, because I don't know when the resupply is going to happen. So then they start hoarding, and it becomes like a run at the banks, where all of a sudden there's no toilet paper, which makes literally no sense in the current crisis. But it's a very human behavior. It's not surprising if you study human behavior. But if the moment the prices or the toilet paper started dwindling on the shelves, and store managers or whatever saw that increase in demand, they were able to increase the price from $5 a pack to $10, $20 a pack. Now you're forcing people to make decisions like, well, maybe I don't need 10 packs of toilet paper right now. Yep. Maybe I can get by on other things. We can also talk about the guy who's been in the New York Times for buying up 18,000 bottles of hand sanitizer to hold and sell at a higher price. Now, there's a couple of ways.
I was going to ask you about that incident, because I'm torn, especially when I see the local sheriff showing up to force them to donate what they bought.
Yeah. There's probably some constitutional issues there, yeah. Right? Another story I was told is during one of the hurricanes, I can't remember which one, a couple of entrepreneurs, or you could say social aides, basically. They did good things. They went and loaded a truck full of water, bottles of water, and drove it across 3 state lines into the storm area to sell those bottles of water. Now, a bottle of water costs 60 cents when you buy them in bulk, maybe less. Yeah. And he was selling them for $5 or $10 a piece, or whatever he was selling them for. And someone called the police and shut it down. Now, probably after they had already gotten their water, to be fair, right? But the police show up and say, you can't do this. It's price gouging, and make him either give it away or leave. Well, what does that do? There was a problem because those people needed water. Okay. This guy solved that problem because he identified it. Number one, these people need water. I can make money doing it. So he rents a truck, maybe buys a truck, loads it with water, and drives it across. Now, you should say he could have done that for a cheaper profit. Okay, well, why didn't you? Why didn't you load a truck and get your friends and drive across state lines and sell it for 30% markup, because that's fair to you? It's not up to you or anyone on the outside to determine what fair is. That's how markets work. The buyer and the consumer together determine what a fair price is. Any price that is voluntarily paid is fair. And if you need water because you don't have any, you'd be happy to pay $5 to incentivize someone to drive across the country and bring it to you. And that's what it encourages new suppliers to enter the market. In the same way, it can encourage investors, businessmen, to speculate and prepare. And well, imagine that somebody in a hurricane belt area decided to retain a warehouse and fill that warehouse with a cache of water from floor to ceiling, or MREs, or gasoline, or whatever resource was going to be scarce. Now
Blue
he's incurring all kinds of, what's that?
blue tarps.
Yeah, blue tarps be perfect, right? So he's incurring a lot of risk here. He's got costs with the warehouse. He's got to buy them. He's got to retain them. He's got to pull security on them. There's also got to be some measure of turnover because tarps are going to dry rot and MREs are going to expire. So he's got to figure out a way to cycle his inventory, okay? But he's got a thought. He's speculating. That's all it's called, is speculation. We do it all the time with oil. We do it with energy. We do it with sugar, potatoes, lots of things you can speculate. You buy low today and sell high later. And that provides a value to society, because now there wouldn't even be a shortage, because he could make his money back on a 300% markup as opposed to a 10,000% markup, and everybody's happy. And I think most of us would be happy to pay 300% on a bottle of water during a hurricane when there's no running water, or gasoline or whatever. So it encourages preparation over time. And so I heard people say that this guy who hoarded the hand sanitizer is gross and selfish. So a couple of things. Number one, again, if there's been more dynamic pricing, maybe he wouldn't have been able to go out and hoard all of the hand sanitizer, because the market signals would have been clearer from the outset for how people should be spending their money and procuring goods one way or the other. Secondly, though, he went out to like Dollar Generals, gas stations, places all over that were not in demand areas, and he got the supplies there and consolidated them to sell in one place. Right. Imagine, for instance, that there was like everyone buys up milk and bread during blizzards for whatever reason. I don't know why. You go to the grocery store because you want some milk, and the grocery store is out of milk because everyone else has the same idea. Well, now you could drive to every gas station around your community, because they have milk usually, and people don't maybe go there right away. So maybe there's no milk the first one or the second one, but the eighth one, you find a gallon of milk, and it costs 50% more than with the grocery store, because that's the usual gas station markup, and you're happy to have it. Yeah. Well, wouldn't you have been happier if you could pay, let's say, 400% markup and never having left the grocery store to begin with? You go to one place, you get what you need, you pay more than you wanted to pay. You don't have to drive around town, you don't have to look for it. There's value in consolidation. Another economics class lesson, we talked about rent seeking. Rent seeking is the ultimate evil in economics. It's a way of extracting value without generating new value. And often we see rent seeking in forms of regulatory capture, the way that people can lobby the government to pass laws to prevent other people from encroaching on them as competition. Say in Louisiana, classic example, Louisiana requires a license to arrange flowers, which is insane. And the reason for that is because florists don't want competition. There was a Supreme Court case a few years ago where monks were making coffins out of simple cypress boxes. And in Louisiana, you can only buy a casket from a licensed funeral director. Well, what public good does that serve? It's rent seeking, pure and simple. So I asked my professor after the class, I said, let's go over some more examples of rent seeking. I said, is arbitrage an example of rent seeking, where I go on the stock market and I buy a stock for $1 and I sell it 10 minutes later for $1.25? Is my rent seeking? He says no, because arbitrage is a kind of information correction, and information is value. Because if you know that the price ought to be higher, then you're correcting information. You're buying low and selling high to correct for an inefficiency in the market, and that provides value to the economy broadly. And that's the same thing here. So a man who buys hand sanitizer for cheap and sells for more, so long as that sale is voluntary, is providing arbitrage. He is consolidating a resource, and he's correcting for inefficiencies in the market. Because if I want hand sanitizer and it's not at Walmart, my next step is going to be to go online and see if I can order it off of eBay or wherever. I'm not going to drive out an hour and a half to find the Dollar General in the swamp to see if they have some hand sanitizer left over. It's a huge benefit to me in terms of value for me to buy it off of the one guy. But the problem is the cognitive dissonance is I don't go through all those machinations in my mind as a regular consumer. All I see is a bottle of hand sanitizer that only costs $1 on sale now for $10. And I think that I'm getting robbed. And that's how these laws come into place. They're bipartisan. And I used to be the same way. I grew up in New Orleans. I am no stranger to hurricanes and disasters. And I know what it feels like to feel like you're getting cheated when you're vulnerable. And I know that and I get that. And I used to be just like everybody else, that I would see price gouging, I was angry about it and emotional. But it took me studying the issue closely, reading closely about it, to understand that anti-price gouging laws achieve the exact opposite of what they want to achieve, which is to get goods effectively and efficiently into the hands of people who need it. And so that's why I'm trying to raise groundswell support. We have to change the culture first, I think, because no politician wants to touch this. It's dangerous. I mean, hell, I'm running for an office, and I'm already concerned about the backlash that I'm going to get from it. But I think you have to be on the front of issues. You have to be brave enough to push the issues that make sense, even when they don't align with popular opinion. You know, and that's the virtue of a Republican system, is you put experts in who can, as opposed to democracy. Pure democracy just goes directly to the emotions of the people. A Republican system of government relies on expertise.
Yeah, the big question in this particular crisis that you and I, who have dealt with hurricanes multiple times, know is the one about the paycheck. You know, this is now it's affecting because the government has shut it down. The economy, I mean, people aren't getting paychecks, so we're having to do everything we can do to figure out how to get folks paid enough so they can pay their rents, pay their mortgages, buy food, and those kind of things. How do you find, is there a balance to be struck between the market concepts that you and I are both very familiar with about this issue? They probably had the same professors up there, but at Harvard. But the question is, you know, what's the balance, or is there a balance to be struck when people are not able to get a paycheck?
You know, I don't, in most issues like this, it's not, people like to say balance, and it's almost like a cop out of saying, well, I understand the concept, but this is different because it feels different. And I would say the theory plays out on all levels. A lot of people will say things like, oh, that makes sense in a classroom, but not in real life. Exactly. When people say that, it means, to me, it means they really just don't understand the underlying theory. Or potentially there are externalities and other factors that are playing in. So you're right, people aren't earning paychecks. But we can't think narrowly. It's not just about the paychecks. Why aren't people earning paychecks? Because the value isn't being created. Right? And we can't create value out of nothing. And value is not just a dollar amount, but it's the appreciation that we receive for goods or services. It is the value to the economy broadly. Capitalism is so great as a system because I can get wealthier without taking from anybody else. As opposed to a pre-capitalist system, for me to have gold, I had to take your gold. Well, in a capitalist system, and especially one with a fiat currency like we have today, I know a lot of people don't like fiat currencies, but there's a lot of good behind it, is we can create value from nothing with ideas, with information, with efficiencies. And so in that regard, people aren't working, and so value is not being created. And so we have to find out, okay, what are we going to do about this? Because it is a crisis. And it gets down to, like, I think about it, like, what are the most basic values that we all consume? And it's like food, water, electricity, shelter. Those are the needs. That's the basis of value. Beyond that, there's like entertainment and, you know, other services and other things we can provide. So you have to figure out, how do we ensure that those base value creations are continuing, or do we have enough surplus in inventory to maintain a lull in production? And I don't know. I think the answer that the government's come up with is kind of a cheat. It might work, which is just they're basically printing money to give it away. And I heard I've seen a lot of libertarian friends of mine saying, "Oh, well, you know, this is really just a refund on my taxes." Well, that's fine to think about it that way, but I can assure you the government's not scaling back any programs to deal with that refund. If the government was like, "Oh, we're going to close the Department of Education and we're going to refund you that balance," I'd say, "Okay, that's a refund of my tax money."
No, they're just going to big fight about how to keep the government from expanding and reduce it after this is over.
Look, they're going to give us our money back, and they're going to spend it anyway, right? Yeah. They're absolutely going to spend that money anyway, which means they're just printing money, and that's usually bad. Uh, there are some ways to get around it. Modern monetary theory is complicated. I'm not an expert on it, but that's kind of what they're using to get through this. Look, I think that the way to handle this problem at the simplest level is to scale back government operation as well. Scale back all non-essential services and production so that we can just focus on food, shelter, power, water, the things we all need to do, just hunker in place and try to tread water for a little while. And Americans don't do that real well. And the economy has too much inertia. We're trying to push forward. So I'm almost amazed that we're at the level we're at. But, so to answer the question about price gouging or market price, I think that's exactly what we need. Because if the issue is better and more efficient use of the resources that we have, then it shouldn't cost the same thing to buy inessential things, whether they're new cars or window dressings or mattress sales or whatever those things are. We should be just buying water, food, and the most efficient delivery of calories and nutrients in a healthy way to our bodies, electricity, things that we all need to operate. And the way to do that is potentially to raise the price on those goods, also to incent others to find ways to keep doing it. Because if you're a farmer and you have to scale back your production, or you have to buy new equipment to increase social distancing, or whatever it is that you have to do, you need to have a financial incentive to do that. Patriotism and love for fellow man will only get us so far. And the Defense Production Act, I think, is a direction that can help, and that's involving the government. It's a big government thing, so you should really use strict scrutiny when applying that sort of solution.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that price control, or not price controls, but natural pricing, dynamic pricing, is the right way. And I should be clear too that I am a businessman, but I'm a real estate developer. I'm not involved in retail at all, so I don't have a dog in this fight at all. If anything, my rents are probably going to go down because of this, and that it is what it is.
The only dog I've got in this fight is things like toilet paper. I would like to see it be on the shelves so I can go buy some instead of having to expend the extra cost of me or my wife driving to like 8 different stores, which you end up paying a higher price for the toilet paper in the first place if you get it.
Now, toilet paper is an interesting case because we're almost at 100% production capacity for toilet paper right now. Toilet paper factories run and have run for 24 hours a day for decades to meet the production requirements. So we've been at a very stable equilibrium for many, many years, and the market is not prepared for this kind of spike. Now, the truth is, are people consuming more toilet paper? No. They're buying more, but they're not consuming more. And what that tells me, if I'm an investor in toilet paper, let's say, or I'm a toilet paper speculator, is what that's going to mean is a lull in sales when there's going to be a market correction down the line. So the stores are replenishing their shelves, but people are going to have stockpiles of toilet paper in their house. It's going to take a long time to get through. And that's going to result in, and whether it's in a month or 2 or 3, you're going to see a significant reduction in consumption at the retail level of toilet paper. So you don't necessarily need to change production levels. I think this is just something we're going to have to weather. But what could happen if it got bad enough, and if prices were to change dynamically, you could have potentially people building new machines, opening new factories, finding new supply chains to deliver new goods to market. The fear from a business standpoint is what's called the whiplash effect, that there's this big spike right now. Okay, I'm going to open Ragsdale Toilet Paper Inc. right here in New Orleans. And by the time I've got my business loan and my factory set up and the first toilet paper is running off the line, expecting a certain profit, now that lull in sales comes that I was talking about, and I've whiplashed back in the other direction. That now I'm stuck with all this extra production capacity and no demand to meet it. And that's a fear of the market.
The Defense Production Act exists, really, is because company leadership, that's a risk that most of the time is too high for a major corporation to take, like Ford. And unfortunately, that's why we have the dang Defense Production Act, I believe, is to help them retool, so to speak, to manufacture the numbers that are needed in this case.
Right. And what that does is it allows us as a society to accept the risk on that kind of speculation as opposed to the businesses individually, because they won't.
Yeah.
And there's value in that, that we're assuming the risk. And that's one of those values that can exist from a large government, a large defense system. We just need to be very careful about how we employ it, and we need to be exercise scrutiny, when we do it. I think now's a good time. I think now is a good time to do that.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Bobby. I know you're a busy guy with the kids and your own business and your wife and everything. And we do pray for y'all, like we are for our whole country, that we get past this crisis and come out on the other side a stronger America. You mentioned that you're helping facilitate getting PPE supplies and other goods into the New Orleans hot zone. To healthcare folks and those kind of essential services and everything. What's a good way for folks that might see this, that have those stocks, that want to get them down here, for folks to contact you so you can help them facilitate deliveries?
Sure. I think the best way probably is to maybe find me on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to find, but the URL is facebook.com/Bobby, BOBBIE .Ragsdale, RAGSDALE. You can send me a note on there and I'll put it to the right people.
Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And for my audience, once again, this is the Rob Maness Show, and coming to you with our guests from New Orleans, Louisiana, amid the Chinese Communist Party pandemic. Have a great one, and we'll see you next time.